Hey everyone, welcome back. I am here with Linda Lacour Hobar, who's one of my favorite people. Hi, Linda.
Hey, good to see you.
It
Hello.
is it is so good to see you. Many will recognize your name, and some might go, I know that name, but where do I know that name from? And Linda is the face and the hand behind the Mystery of History, which is a 4-volume history curriculum. And it's amazing. Our family has it. We use it and we love it. We have the audio version of it. And so they get to listen to your fun voice. But welcome, because we're not here actually to talk about history. We're here to talk about some characters in the Bible. So welcome to the Homegrown Generation Family Expo, Linda.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, and welcome to those of you who are watching right now. I do want to let you guys know, because I know there's been some questions about the contest giveaways. We've got a lot of really exciting giveaways. And so there are some new ways that you can enter. So if you're on Facebook, you can go to the Homegrown Generation live page that you're watching this on and look for the post there on how you can enter the contest. And if you're not on Facebook, you can actually enter through the website. So just go to the website, make sure you're logged in, look under conference, and you'll see how you can enter to win all sorts of exciting prizes. But we're not here to talk about that either. We are here to talk about Mary and Martha, which is so exciting. But first, Linda, tell us a little bit about you and your family.
Sure. Well, I guess you could define us as one of those pioneering homeschool families because, Yvette, we started as far back as 1989. Oh, goodness, like the late 80s. Honestly, that was before there was Google, if you can even
Right.
imagine. So I have 3 grown children now. We homeschooled 17 years, and I have 2 grandkids. Can I tell a fun, quick story on the
Yes.
grandchildren? So the oldest grandchild was born right here in our home. It was a planned home birth with a midwife, but baby number 2, the other grandchild, well, let's just say the midwife didn't quite make it. So I had the opportunity to deliver her. That's our Lily. So most beautiful and terrifying experience of my life. So there, now we can all relax.
So now we can call you Dr. Linda
Oh,
Lacour
yeah.
Hobar, right? I think you should put that name at the end. You should be an MD. I think
Yeah.
so.
I earned a new skill set. Yes.
You wear many, many hats, including delivering babies. It's an exciting thing.
Apparently,
So,
yeah. Now,
yeah.
I do want your listeners to know, though, that I certainly do not come at this topic of Mary and Martha as any kind of an expert. I mean, none of us have gotten to meet these two New Testament ladies. Really, my skill set is world history, but I did homeschool for 17 years and survived it. And really, I come here today in humility because this is really what I learned about myself to help me understand my weaknesses. So I come here to talk about my weaknesses, not my strengths.
Well, I might disagree with you a little bit on that, but we'll continue to talk about the subject. So,
Yes. All right.
um, yeah. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to ask if you would pray for our attendees because I do
Sure.
want this to be such an encouraging time.
Absolutely.
So,
Oh, I would
yes,
be honored to do that.
please do that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Sure. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for already a fantastic day of encouragement, and we are most grateful for your word. Thank you, God, that you do not put your word in front of us just so we can listen to a bunch of fun stories or hard stories, but because you have things to teach us. Lord, I pray that you would open our hearts to the things that you want us to learn, that we would glean your wisdom and your understanding, and that we would just have a better understanding of ourselves after today's session with Linda. And God, I just pray that you would speak through Linda, that you would give her the words to say, and that everything that's said and everything that's heard would be glorifying to you. We commit the rest of our day to you. We thank you, Lord, for our families and just for those who have gone before us and paved the way and who continue to bring encouragement to us. In your precious name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Yes. So I'm super excited to do this with you. You and I have talked about this Mary and Martha thing. And the first time I heard you talk about it was actually, I didn't hear your session, but we were at a homeschool convention together maybe a year ago. I can't remember. It was at Teach
Hmm.
Them Diligently. And somehow we got on the topic and you said, well, I do this session on Mary and Martha. And I was like, that sounds really intriguing.
Hmm.
And so I'm excited to talk to you about this because let's talk about this whole story of Mary and Martha and how we can identify who we are and maybe even who our kids are.
Yes. As a matter of fact, what might be fun is right now, if your listeners might pop into the comment box whether or not they think they're a Mary or a Martha.
Ah,
And we'll see at the end because I do have a quiz. But
yes.
maybe your co-host can kind of be tabulating that as we go. And let's just see who tuned in today, if it
Yeah.
was Mary or Martha or a Lazarus or two.
I love it.
So that
Can
would
you
be
see the
fun.
comments, Linda? Are you able to see them on the
No, I
side there?
cannot, but I'll
Oh,
just
okay.
trust you guys
If
to
you
tell
click
me.
on comments, you may be able to see them. You should see that button up at the top that says comments, I think.
Oh, I do see them.
Oh,
Yay.
see? Yay. Now you
Oh,
can see them
wow.
too.
That opened a whole new thing. Okay, cool.
So yeah, so
Let
let's talk about this. Let's figure out this Mary
Yes,
and Martha thing.
sure. Well, the first thing I honestly need to do is go to the scripture. Let's find the stories about them. So I've got my glasses on so I can read it to you. So I get to be narrator for a minute. But if you didn't know, we have a couple of major stories of these sisters out of the New Testament. The first is in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 and following. And this is the classic story that most people know. This is the one that pastors speak on when they preach. And so it goes like this: as it happened, Jesus entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. So right there, we know that Martha has the gift of hospitality. And then she called her sister Mary, who also sat at Jesus's feet. By the way, I have the word feet circled in my notes because most of the time we see Mary, she's going to be literally at Jesus's feet. All right, so she was there to hear his word. Now, Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. So she's kind of fussing, isn't she? And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha. And of course, he uses her name twice, which I guess is his way of like the middle name.
Right.
He says, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. So Jesus goes to bat and defends Mary, even as she sits at his feet in worship. Now, the next story about the sisters is where we get a little bit more, I think, about their personality, because we're going to see them respond to a crisis in two very different ways, similar but different. So bear with me. This is from John chapter 11. And this is the famous story of Lazarus, their brother, who is deathly ill. So the sisters, like, first of all, they call for Jesus because, like, they realize he could make a difference, right? And there's a line in verse 5 that says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So let's just clear the air. He loved all three of them. He definitely loves Martha. It's not an either or thing. But get this. So remember, they've called to him because of this crisis. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Well, think about that for just a minute. Jesus allows this crisis, a life or death crisis, because he has a better plan. Oh, I think that's so comforting that we need to realize sometimes Jesus really does allow our crises for a much bigger,
Yeah.
better plan. Okay, so now what's kind of cute is that we have these two different responses that follow in John chapter 11. So let's look at Martha first. This is how she responds, because what's happened is Jesus delays his trip. He allows Lazarus to die. And now let's see what happens. So Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, because he does show up, she went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. So I picture Martha, I mean, again, she's taken it upon herself to go out there. Now, Martha says to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. So again, she's kind of wagging her finger at him and at the same time making an appeal, a heartfelt appeal. Now, Jesus goes on, and what's very interesting is his response to her is not one of pity or weeping, but he gives her a theology lesson. This is the section in the Bible where Jesus will say to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. I don't know, Yvette, if you're old enough to remember an old camp song that would sing that, like, I am the resurrection
I
and
don't
the life.
remember that
You know
one.
that one? Oh, God.
No.
I shouldn't have even tried to do that. I'll regret it later when I hear that. But anyway, it was a great old camp song. So anyway, and then Martha responds, and what is so cool is that we have the testimony of a first century Christian woman who will say, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And she says this, not even knowing Lazarus is going to be raised from the dead and not knowing that Jesus is going to be raised from the dead, but she believes. So we do clearly see that Martha is a woman of great faith, which I deeply admire. But let's shift gears to Mary. What happens in the next part of this story? Well, first of all, Martha goes over and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." We really don't know why Martha did this in secret. All I can imagine is that Mary, because I'm assuming she's far more emotional woman, because she's always at Jesus's feet. I'm wondering if Martha's afraid that Mary's just going to cause a scene. That she's such an emotional woman that she like secretly says, "The master's calling you." Or maybe she's a little jealous because, again, Jesus personally reaches out to Mary. He is calling for her, which just greatly moves me. If you ever wonder if Jesus sees your weeping, he does. I mean, we know that in this story. But anyway, here's another interesting part. So then the Jews who were with her, referring to Mary in the house and comforting her, when they saw Mary, they rose up quickly and went out with her. Mary has a support group. Do you see that? Martha maybe doesn't need one or doesn't have one that day. She marches out there on her own to meet Jesus on the road, but Mary has a support group. I think that says something. Maybe Mary's a little bit more vulnerable. Maybe she's more transparent. But anyway, then we have Mary going to Jesus, or him coming to her. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet. Second time we've seen this. She's at his feet again. And she says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Interesting. She and Martha use the exact same words. "Jesus, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." But they say it with such different posture, don't
Yeah.
they? Martha's kind of fussing, and Mary's at his feet weeping. Now, I think you know what happens after that. Jesus looks at the crowd, and the Bible says, one of the shortest verses in the whole Bible, Jesus wept. Now, Jesus is not crying because Lazarus is dead. He knows he's about to raise one of his best friends from the dead. He is weeping because he is having he's Jesus, God, man, God, God, and he is having a moment here of emotion, and he's weeping for the people. He feels them. Once again, if you ever wonder if he feels your tears, apparently he does.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, and then Jesus tells them to go and take away the stone, which is a beautiful foreshadowing of his own death and resurrection. But here's something funny. So, you know what Martha does right before Jesus rolls away the stone? She's being such a Martha here, and I just love her for this. Martha stops to give him a little lecture about the stench. She's like, "Lord, by this time there's a stench. He's been dead 4 days. Thank you, Martha, for letting Jesus know that this body might have an odor. This could be embarrassing." I mean, and then we don't hear a peep out of her after that. But anyway, Jesus goes ahead and then he raises Lazarus. Lazarus, come forth. And here's more to the story. Many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. So for just a second, realize Mary maybe didn't have that same theology lesson from Jesus. Maybe Mary didn't have that same kind of faith. Maybe it wasn't a book faith, but she has a powerful witness that influences others, right?
Right.
So anyway, there's a little bit more to the story. Ready? So in John 12, we hear that 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus was, who had been dead. Can you imagine the crowd? I mean, this is a man resurrected from the dead. Anyway, there they made him a supper, and listen to this. And Martha served. True story. That is John 12:2. Martha's serving. So sort of kind of it's like maybe she didn't learn anything, or maybe she just can't not be a Martha. She's still serving. And where are we going to find Mary? This is a beautiful passage. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus. Where is she again? She's at his
His feet.
feet. And she wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. There's so much packed into that. For one, I'm thinking this is such a spontaneous act of worship that it's just beautiful. And then I'm wondering, like, why doesn't she have a cloth? Why does she have to use her hair? Is it so spontaneous that she just wasn't even prepared? Um, Also, so many use essential oils. So I think we can all imagine the aroma. And I'm thinking if she wiped his feet with her hair in this oil, that when she went to bed that night, she still smelled it. It had to have lingered for a long time.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's just beautiful. We're going to come back to a little bit more of that. Now, I think you know that Judas Iscariot fussed at her and the other disciples like, hey, this could have been sold because
Right.
apparently this was a year's worth of
Yeah.
a salary
Yeah.
of oil. The average median income, I think, in America is $40,000 a year. So we're talking about a $40,000 bottle of perfume. And you know what Jesus said? Let her alone. He defended her extravagant act of worship, if it was spontaneous, planned, or not. And in Mark, we get a little PS, and then I'm done reading to you. But Mark 14:3-9 says, this is Jesus speaking, where he says, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. Seldom in if it seldom in the New Testament do we ever see the light shone on someone other than Jesus, but Jesus shines a little light on her, which again, she's just, I think, a broken, repentant, fragile woman who
Mhm.
has found hope in life in Jesus Christ. And he's like impressed. He loves her for that. So that's the setting.
I love it. It's so interesting because when you put it all together, you can really see a picture of their personalities.
I think so. I think so. So, of course, I have a little bit more to say on that. You ready? A few years ago, read a book by Anthony Gregorek. It's called Mind Styles. He was the creator of a model called Mind Styles. And here's how he would describe different personalities. And we're going to enter Mary and Martha into this, okay? Which,
Okay.
by the way, he gave us the mind part. I applied the Mary Martha part. So basically, he would say that people tend to think in concrete terms or abstract. So, concrete versus abstract. We're probably all on a spectrum, but the concrete thinker sees things very black and white, right and wrong, yes and no. And that person thinks very easily of tangible things, of measurable things. So, think with me about schedules, time,
Mhm.
money, chores, like putting out the dinner for Jesus. Now, the abstract thinker, in great contrast, is the person that's just all wishy washy. It's a free fall thinker, it's a daydreamer. And that person is far more caught up in the intangibles, the non measurable. So, think love, joy, beauty, peace, creativity. Now, getting back to Gregor, he also says that people tend to process their thinking one of two ways, either sequentially, which is in order, or randomly. So that kind of speaks for itself. But yes, the sequential person very naturally sees a B following an A and a two follows a one, and everything's kind of logical for them. It's ordered, right? Where the random person just doesn't have that built-in grid. All right, there's no step one to begin with, much less a two. There may not be a B, though there's an A. Not if C is like a little bit more enticing. So that person is led by feelings. All right, so stay with me here. If you can
I'm
lump
staying.
that together, yes. So if you had a person who was both concrete and sequential, well, you really have a thinker on your hands. And
Mhm.
if you lump together the person who is abstract and random, God help them, you probably have a feeler. So we're generalizing here as thinkers and feelers. Again, we're all a little bit, but there's a spectrum.
Sure.
So now let's go back to Martha. I can't help but think and just deduct from the scriptures that perhaps she's both concrete and sequential. I, she's a thinker. She's task oriented. She's the girl to get the job done. It's very natural to her. And because of her concrete ways, so Martha's methodical. Her friends may call her a little bit of a control freak. She may not be the most flexible person. And to stay in shape, I just have to throw this in here. I think she's the woman that can run on that treadmill and maybe do the whole point system, on food. And again, because why she can put a task above a feeling. In fact, I would say that's to her the higher calling, like getting the job done. That was pretty clear the day she is serving Jesus. My Martha friends always say, well, somebody had to put the meal on the table. But anyway, she would be a servant, maybe even to a fault, at least according to Jesus. He did fuss at her that one day for just not being able to let it go. Now, I have to insert a personal story, Yvette. I know this Martha character. far too well, not because I am one. I've already expressed, I believe I'm a self-proclaimed Mary. I think it's in the notes, so I can't even pretend. But my mother is just a classic Martha through and through. She kept an immaculate home, a well-stocked pantry. One of my sisters is a rock solid Martha. We would nickname her Martha Stewart because she's that lady, that can really pull it together for the party and everything. My firstborn, I would say, has a Martha personality because she literally started making her own lesson plans like in fifth grade because I'm not making lesson plans. I wrote down what we did after we did it, which, by the way, that's not
Right.
lesson planning, just so you know, worked for me. So anyway, this Martha, I kind of married a Martha in male form as far as, he runs a budget and a tight ship. So he's my figures person. I accuse him of having like a whiteboard in his head where he can see numbers. I don't have that whiteboard. So anyway, my problem, Yvette, is that my whole life, I would say I've kind of been surrounded by kind of your Martha figures. They're very capable people, very responsible, very efficient. And truth be told, I just cannot measure up to them, not by their standards. So let's kind of go back to my mother for a moment, who, by the way, she's a wonderful person. But as a devout Martha, what this meant, again, if she can put a task above a relationship, then rather than ride bikes right before dinner when the sun is setting, she's going to have dinner on the table on time with a meat and a starch and a vegetable. I mean, always. And rather than maybe read out loud to us in an unmade bed, she's going to make the bed, all right, and skip the reading. Or rather than keep a journal, which heaven forbid might expose feelings, she cleaned the house by herself as a gift to us. So I was very cared for. I was very loved by what she did for me. Martha enjoys doing. So are you processing all this?
I'm tracking with you. Yes, I love the idea of a Martha. But I am definitely not. Well, I can be a Martha in some ways, but I tend more towards Mary.
Mm-hmm,
So can we talk about Mary?
Yes, let's
Okay.
turn to her. Well, by my definition, I have already revealed that she, to me, is your abstract random personality type. If we, again, we're just kind of deriving what we can from the scripture. But think of this being a high feelings person, her feelings nature. It also means that this poor woman is really unprepared for just about everything in life. So her friends and family may label her flighty because she is. I would say she's more the yoga Whole Foods type than she is the treadmill, right? Because she has to be out of the box. And she may even be a little flower child, of the 70s. That just fits her. I have to tell you real quick, Yvette, just this last Tuesday, my husband and I went to see the Beach Boys in concert. And it was my Christmas present to him, were these tickets. And I cried for 2.5 hours through the Beach Boys because it took me back to high school. It was just so nostalgic. I also realized how old I am. Like some of your listeners don't maybe even know Beach Boys. But anyway, the lead singer is 78. And so I was just like, wow.
Wow.
I know. But yeah, it took me back because I am that girl from the 70s. So yeah, it fits. But anyway, let's go back to Mary. So yeah, she can put feelings above a task. In fact, Mary considers that the higher calling. Those feelings are actually more important to a Mary. So she is passionate to a fault. In modern life, I suspect that drama follows her more than it does Martha because she doesn't have good boundaries. I know she runs late because she's not a planner. Do you know some of your ladies listening now are missing this live if they're married, but they're going to catch it on the rebroadcast?
That's why we have replays. You're welcome.
Couldn't get here on time, and I understand that. When I do this live, I always have a few Marys like creep in the room late, and it's cute. But truthfully, Mary is probably not the most responsible woman because her feelings will get in the way of tasks. Now, remember my mother, who I said really loved us by what she did for us? Well, unfortunately, in contrast, I don't naturally have a servant mentality. Not because I don't love people. No, I mean, I can barely take care of myself, much less take care of other people. It's kind of nice. Ron and I are empty nesters now, and it's amazing how much easier it is for me to live life with just two of us. Because when there was five of us, I mean, it was just hard for me. But the bottom line is that I don't love people by what I do for them particularly, but how I spend time with them. This
Mhm.
is also a love language. So I teach, I
Yeah.
play, I ride bikes at sunset when the weather calls, I write,
Mhm.
invest emotionally into people by counsel and by prayer. And if it's not obvious, that meant I was a softy mom. So, yes, parenting was really hard for me. You add homeschooling to that. That was a tremendous challenge for
Mm.
me personally.
Yeah.
Not that we weren't successful, I'd say we were, but it was hard at times. But Mary, you can do this if I can do it. So, in closing this description of Mary, I do have to direct you to a couple of theories. Let's go back to her and that perfume, that oil. Oh, okay. So, one theory is that maybe she's at Jesus's feet extravagantly worshiping him because maybe by the way I've just described her, maybe she's a little bit of a bad girl. Maybe she has struggled with boundaries. Maybe she's made some poor decisions and wandered down a path somewhere and she has a lot to repent for. You know, the more we've done to disgrace our Lord, the more repentant we are and at his feet in gratefulness. So maybe that big heart got her into some trouble. We don't know for sure. But there is another theory. Okay, there's another theory. Some have suggested that perhaps Mary, when pouring out that expensive oil, what if she was offering to Jesus her one and only dowry? The
Mm.
one thing she may have saved for perhaps a future husband, but she gave it up. Maybe at one time she even thought Jesus just might be her earthly husband. Maybe she loved him so much before she realized and understood that he would be a heavenly groom. Isn't
Mm.
that a sweet theory that if
Yeah.
she just like gave it up, maybe any chance for a heavenly husband and just put that dowry anointed him with it to say, "I'm all in.
Yeah.
You're my man for life,
Yeah.
forever." I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
again, we
That's
don't know
interesting.
for sure, but what
Yeah.
beautiful theories either are. I think I relate better to the one where maybe she was just a sinner,
Yeah.
but the other one was also very sweet.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's going to be so interesting when we get to heaven and everything becomes so crystal clear to us. And we're going to be like, oh, that's what Mary meant when she did that. And it's so much fun watching all of these comments pop up and all the Marys and the
We can't wait
Marthas
to
and the
see them.
in-betweens. So how do, in homeschooling, how do we tie this all together as homeschool moms? Because
Yes,
once we
yes, yes.
figure out, which are you going to do? Are you going to do a test with us?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. Yay.
So I'll very quickly let's try to apply some of what we just talked
Okay.
about to homeschooling. That's why one reason why we're all gathered here.
Okay.
So I would picture Martha as a homeschool mom. Okay, this is the lady, y'all know her. She's got color-coded lesson
Yeah.
plans. She's a field trip organizer or maybe the debate team leader. I would say second, by method of education, she may be the one who follows the classical model of education because I think we all know it's one of the most hard or difficult. I mean, it certainly takes a lot of preparation. Number three, she can run that homeschool co op very well and probably should. And I would suspect that her classroom is the one lined with file cabinets. She has a place for everything. And Mary, on the other hand, if we drop her into a homeschool world, well, I think I picture a little bit more of a hot mess. This is a woman with no lesson plans. I told you I didn't make lesson plans for my kids for the longest time. She runs late to field trips. She may follow an unschooling approach or perhaps an eclectic approach. And you know why she's eclectic, Yvette? Because, she buys all of it on impulse, but then can't part with any of it because it's so hard to sell. So anyway, and I don't think you really want her in charge of your support group, though you want her there to encourage people. And ironically, I've started a support group at my church, but it's just because I love these ladies so much. But I wait till 2 weeks before the meeting to announce what we're doing. And last, I think Mary is the one. I picture her walls lined with artwork of her students. And it's just taped. She thinks one day I'm going to hang all those things in little frames, but it's not going to happen. So I have one tip, and that is don't hang it with one piece of tape because then the top corners are going to
Oh.
curl because it's going to hang that long. You'll never get rid of it. You're sentimental. So at least put two pieces of tape up and you're in better shape.
Yes.
So Anyway, I do want to insert one more thing about Mary, just
Yeah.
lest we depict her off completely. But I don't think Mary's necessarily a lazy woman. That's
No.
not why she struggles. It might look that way to an outsider, and her house may or may not be a disaster. Like, I've actually kind of wondered this about myself. Like, if I am such a Mary, which I think I am, then how come I do have sort of a tidy home? That you've been to my home, you've
Sure.
seen, I've got my coordinating this and that. I mean, it's not a complete disaster. Well, I think I figured it out. Here's what it is. I think as a Mary, I so highly value beauty. That's an
Mm.
abstract thing. God is
Mhm.
the source of all beauty. That it's like that is what drives me to pick up the pillow off the floor that matches the throw, or
Right.
just to pick up the toy so that I can see their pretty coffee table. So my dreamy visual side actually helps my home stay tidy, not my to-do list.
Right.
And just do not open the drawers or the closets, because that's where the disaster lies, because I can't see it.
Yes, I again, I'm listening to all the descriptions, and I feel like, I'm so much of a Mary, but there's that Martha in me too. And that's one of the things for me as well, is that I feel like, well, I like things tidy. But then when it comes to scheduling, and let me just say, I have done the color coded schedule. I am really good at that, and I haven't used it ever. So I
Oh,
can make the color coded schedule. I can make it look pretty, and then I cannot make it actually work for
it's
me.
hard to keep.
So
Yeah.
I'm like striving to be the Martha, but really I'm more of a Mary, um,
Mhm.
for sure. So okay, so how can we figure out
All
what
right,
we
I'm
are?
ready to give you a test.
Okay.
So, ladies, here's what we're going to do
Do they need a
is
pencil and paper?
yes, yes, if you'd grab a little piece of paper and a pen, and this is funny, again, when I do this live, usually the Mary has to borrow some of that from the Martha sitting next to her. But grab, because what we're going to do is I'm going to give you 20 questions, and so you can either number your page very quickly, 1 to 20, or just number as we go. But I'm going to ask you a question and tell you to either give yourself a -1, a 0, or a +1, depending on whether or not it describes you. And I'll tell
Okay.
you, blah, 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 give yourself a -1, or blah, 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 give yourself a +1. And if neither applies, just give yourself a 0. And then at
Okay.
the end, we have a scoring. And just to let you know, this test really and truly comes from me on one end of the spectrum, my mother on the other. So I took a real live Mary and Martha, and this is what we have. Okay, so number
Okay.
one, for example, if more often than not your library books are overdue, then give yourself a -1. Mary has a very hard time getting those books back to the library. I just consider
Oh.
it a handling fee. I mean, they were nice enough
I'm
to let
laughing
me
because I
borrow
literally
them.
just paid like $16 in library fees.
That is funny.
Yikes.
Okay, number 2, if you have ever menu planned for a month or have several meals in the freezer, then you get a +1. That is very much that is a Martha thing to have advance. Now, I
So
menu plan weekly, but if you
so do
menu
we just
plan
give
for a
a
whole
do we
month,
do a 0 if I've never done that before?
yes, yes. If
Okay.
if you've not done it, you get a 0. But
Okay.
if you have done that,
Okay.
you get a +1.
Okay.
All right, number 3, if your family assumes that you'll run late, or you were late to this workshop, or you're watching it recorded because you couldn't make it live, then give yourself a -1. That's a Mary attribute. So Mary gets the minuses, Martha gets the pluses.
Okay.
Number 4, if your shirts or shoes are organized by color, give yourself a +1. That's my mother. Everything's color coded.
Okay.
Okay. Number 5, if you're a curriculum junkie, because it's so hard to sell the old stuff, give yourself a -1. You know how hard it is to get those ISBNs on the sales thing? Okay. Number 6, and tell me if I'm going too fast.
No, no, you're not going too
People
fast for
are
me. But
okay.
I just want to clarify. I'm not supposed to be like, if you're saying you're a -1, I'm not supposed to put +1 if I'm on the other side. I just put 0, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
a -1 if it describes you, a 0 if it doesn't, or a
Okay.
+1 it describes you, and a 0 if it doesn't.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
I'm
Yep,
at
that's good.
-2 right now, just so you know.
Okay. You're right there with me.
Let's
Okay.
continue on.
Yes, yes. I was a -10, my mother's a +10. Yes. Okay. So, let's see, I think I'm on number 6. If you're an extreme couponer, or at least close to it, you get a +1. if you can do the couponing thing. I just don't understand
No.
why they want me to cut out little pieces of paper and reward me for that. Like, I
Who
just throw
has
them away.
time for that?
I just throw them away. I'm horrible on that. I do just look for sales, though, and then I'll buy 3 of them. Okay. Number 7, if your to-do list is on the back of your hand or an envelope or receipt, you get a -1. By the way, I seem to notice that Marthas never write on themselves, but every Mary, a lot of Marys I know, or okay, maybe myself, I write on myself a lot as a little note in Sharpie, so I don't wash it off.
Oh, that's
Martha never
funny.
does that. Okay. Number 8, if you cry spontaneously to love songs on the radio or hymns at church, give yourself a -1. I just confessed I cried through a Beach Boys concert. I was just so nostalgic. Oh my goodness. When I asked my mom that question, she's like, cry through hymns? She's not a weeper. She likes the old hymns, but she's not going to cry about them. Okay, number 9. If you buy in bulk, but work out of labeled containers that are just the right size for your cabinets or cupboards, well, that's a +1. That is a Martha attribute. By the way, yesterday I went to, by chance, they opened up the Container store in my neighborhood.
Oh, fun.
So I went and I was absolutely overwhelmed. I'm like, this is a Martha's dream. There's little
Oh, yeah.
containers for everything.
Well,
I had to
Martha
get
better
out of
dream
there.
of having a really good job because those things are expensive.
I did buy a couple of things for the freezer, but anyway. Okay, number 10. If you often start school in your pajamas or do family read-alouds from the bed, which is unmade, you get a -1. There's just nothing like Charlotte's Web from the sheet. That's what I think. Number 11, if you organize small parties or meetings on an Excel spreadsheet, you get a +1. Excel spreadsheets, they're for Martha. And you know, I have to work in them a lot. Oh, they just make me crazy. I don't like anything in a box. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Number 12, if you've saved the baby teeth of your children, give yourself a -1. I love to ask this question. Most women are like, well, a lot have saved them. I know exactly where my kids' baby teeth are. But you know why? Even I look at it this way, like that is a badge of honor. We should make jewelry out of them. I mean, you and that baby, you cut those teeth in the middle of the night. I know you did. Oh, of course I'm going to save them.
I think the last time we talked about this, I remember telling you that I'd saved my pregnancy test. Does that count?
You remember that?
Do I get a -1 for that?
Yes. And then we talked about the potential smell of that for all time. That's right. Yeah.
Oh,
well, they didn't even make those.
10 years I
found
waited
out.
for the positive pregnancy test. So in all
You keep it, honey.
fairness, it was kind of like a trophy.
There you go. They didn't have home pregnancy tests back when I had my babies. That's how old I am. So, okay. Number 13, we got to move along. If you had a shopping list for any recent homeschool convention before you arrived, give yourself a +1. Or in this context, let's just say if you had looked at the schedule and you knew exactly who you were going to listen to each day, that counts. You get a +1 for being organized for this week. I just kept looking at the time to make sure I wasn't late. Number 14, if you pray often for God's mercy because of mistakes you've made, then you get a -1. Mary prays for God's mercy a lot. Remember, she's a woman that may struggle with boundaries and discernment, so there's a lot of mistakes. I like to go to flower gardens when I have really disappointed myself for the Lord because I feel like flowers are just his beautiful little landscape. And I don't know, God and I have this thing about flowers. So I'll go alone to places to pray when I need his mercy. Number 15, this is just on a lighter note. If you set up the coffee pot or the teapot before you go to bed at night, you get a +1. This is just something that my mom always says to me. Like when I go visit, she'll say, hey, honey, do you want to prepare the coffee before you go to bed? Because she literally sets up her teapot before bed, puts out the teacup and the tea bag. And I'm like, why would I want to do today what I can do tomorrow? It's like eat, drink, and be merry now.
That's right.
So no, I don't ever set that up the night before, but apparently a lot of people do.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, okay. That's a planning thing. Number 16 along those lines, if you unpack the same day that you get home from a trip, you get a +1.
Mm-mm.
I travel a lot, as do you, Yvette, and never have I unpacked on the same day that I get home.
No.
Might sit there quite a few days. I will unpack my hair products, however. I mean,
Yes.
okay. Number 17. If one lunch this week was a half-eaten granola bar that you found at the bottom of your purse, you get a -1. And you know why there's a half-eaten granola bar at the bottom of your purse is because you didn't plan, you were out running your errands. It's like, oh, I didn't, you're not factoring those things because scheduling isn't your strength. So sometimes I have 2 half-eaten granola bars at the bottom of my purse.
Well, 2 halves make a whole, so.
Because I forget that there's one already in there. And number 18, if you usually offer your house guests a hot breakfast, you get a +1. I think that's a Martha thing for a hot breakfast. Now, I'll give my guests hot lunches and hot dinners. Yvette, you've been to my home. I believe I fed you. But breakfast, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah.
I'll feed you like a cat. I'll put things out. Okay, number 19, if you love spontaneous field trips that count for school, you get a -1. You know what I'm talking about when you're like, oh, look, there's a digger next door. Let's make that a field trip. The spontaneous field trips, that's very much a Mary thing. Mary looks for that.
Right.
Because we're always learning. Again, it's a little bit of an unschooling mindset in a healthy way. And last, I just have to say, if you have a planner nearby, you get a +1. I have not owned a planner since college. So,
No.
all right.
Okay.
Now, friends, with all those minuses, -1s, zeros, and +1s, I want you to do the quick math.
Okay. You're
And then I'm
asking
gonna
us to do math.
I know. Do math.
Oh,
Do math
Linda.
now.
They're just ones and zeros.
They're
I
just
think I can
ones.
handle
You can
this.
do this. Yes. And you're gonna get anything from a -10 to a +10. And by all means, feel free to pop into the comments what you just scored.
Yes, I want to see what people are scoring on this.
Maria did hers wrong because she got a +17. Maybe you're married that can't do math. That's cute.
Oh, I love that.
Okay,
Okay.
so if you guys have gotten a number, kind of give me a thumbs up. Okay, I'm seeing a -6, a +3. Okay. By the way, if you score 0, you're like the perfect balance.
Well,
Yeah, that's like a good thing. My daughter-in-law scored a 0. You're not a loser. You're perfect. Okay, I see a +3. I see some minuses. So real quick, here's how the final score would look. Is if you scored from a -10 to a -4, I'm pretty sure you're a Mary. Based on these little silly things I put out there that are my Mary life as a homeschool mom. All right, if you scored a -3 to a +3, well, you're really a Mary Martha mix. You're in a nice, healthy zone. But I think if you're a +4 to a +10, you're probably a Martha. All right, in case you were in doubt. And it's funny, I have women cry in my sessions that do this test because sometimes they'll say, I always thought I was a Martha, but I just scored a Mary. And they're kind of relieved because they've been conflicted and they didn't know why. But maybe you have a lot of skills and people have always assumed you're a Martha or type A when maybe you are, but you're churning on the inside or vice versa.
right.
Somebody who thought they were a Mary might actually have scored a Martha and you're far better off than you thought. So, okay. Now, with that, I don't know, Yvette, if the majority of people who tuned in today really are Marys. The subtitle of this workshop is that it is a workshop for Marys only. But I want to encourage all my Mary and Martha friends. I would like to continue to see some scores pop up. So y'all do
these
that.
are fun.
But I do have some tips for those who truly do register on this scale as a Mary. I don't know if Martha needs to hear the things that I would share. It might help her with a friend, but
Or a child.
Or a child.
sure.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, though I was a Mary, I'd say all three of my children were far more of a Martha than I am. They all needed more structure out of me, and that was hard. But that was part of finding balance in my life. So anyway, I can, though, like I said, let me get to my tips. So you're ready? Do y'all need some encouragement, Marys, or some tips?
We do. I'm a -5. So
-5. Okay. So you're there. You're there. That's all there is to it. And again, I think if I did it again, I'd be a -10. And I see real quick another one saying that their mom was 100% Martha. And they better understand each other. My mom and I have laughed and cried over this session. You know what's sweet too is that over time, honestly, my mom, the Martha, has become more of a Mary because she's 84 years old and she'll say today, you know what? I'll do anything. Life is short and sweet. And so she's a bit more daring. She's let
Mhm.
go of some of her more rigidness to enjoy what she has. And I would say, though I score a Mary, I'm probably more of a Martha now than I used to be, out
Mhm.
of the fact that I'm maturing, and again, there's less in the house and stuff like that. So we're allowed to change some. But
Yes.
okay, so let me just very quickly give you a couple of tips. Number one,
And these are tips for Marys.
yes, tips for
Okay.
Mary, or good ideas for
Okay.
Martha too. If I
Okay.
doubt I've thought of anything that she
Right.
hasn't thought of, but in the event. So number one, I always hosted once a month. I had an in-service day. I borrowed the idea from the schools, but think about it. I would count it as school, but we called it an in-service day, and it meant that we were going to set aside all academics and work just on our home. Why? Because my home means a lot to me as a feeler, and I also wanted to teach my kids more than academics. So this was kind of like home ec. And honestly, my kids grew to hate um, probably our in-service days because it meant we'd start in the closets and then it's like, we've got to finish, we've got to finish. They'd be like, let us do algebra. But anyway, we did do kind of like home projects. So I recommend it at least once a month. That's what we did.
Okay.
Second, you might want to post a lunch menu. That sounds so silly, but post a lunch menu in Sharpie on the fridge. And here's why. By the time you get to lunch on a homeschool day, you're tired. Your crew may still be rambunctious, but Mary drains because she emotionally is caught up in a lot. So posting a lunch menu, I think, just helps take away some of the squabbling. And of course, large families don't squabble over food. They're just happy to be fed. But in a smaller family, they seem to think we're short order cooks. And I just don't have the emotional space to argue about lunch. So that's one idea.
Okay.
Number three, I do recommend that you cut your students off like by two, have some set hours, have a set time for when school is done. Now
Mhm.
they may still have work to do if they piddled around, but you yourself need to be excused. You may need a cutoff time so that they're not using you all day long. For us, it was two. Mom was done, like I said, because after dinner, I can't go back to algebra. I can't go back to geometry. I'm lucky to be there at all at 10 o'clock on those subjects, much less later. So I have a cutoff time. Number four, I do encourage women to be careful with extended obligations. All the co ops and clubs, as good as they are, be careful saying yes to too much. Like, recognize yourself as, listen, I'm a woman without great capacity. I'm a woman that doesn't maybe juggle a schedule well. So I can't have everything lined up. You know, I can't have too much in my schedule. Put some cushion in your life. Um, some breathing room, and do it with great joy,
Yeah.
not restriction, but just great joy. As Americans, we tend to have a feature in us of rugged individualism, but we've got to think about really what's best for the whole family
Mhm.
sometimes and be selective. That's all I'm saying. Okay, number five, I do recommend that if you do keep lesson plans, keep them undated. Like, just don't have dates on the columns. I did eventually start making lesson plans because my kids needed it. I told you they needed more structure than what I
Mhm.
wanted to offer them naturally. But the first lesson plans I made had dates, nearly drove us crazy. So one day I got whiteout. This was a long time ago. I don't know if that's legal anymore. Anyway, and I whited out the dates, and it just gave our family tracks to run on, but not so
Mhm.
rigid. So I could stop and start our lesson plans at any given time.
Right.
And, we've got the whole year to get our days done. Okay, number six, you do need to have school rules. Obviously, Mary's not a strong rule person, but you may need to just make them as you go, once they're not toddlers anymore. And I have a whole list of some school rules that I made. I'll list just a couple of funny ones. I need to watch our time. But again, these were just made of necessity. Like number three, no objects are to be tossed or thrown in the classroom. I had a boy, so of course I needed that rule. Number 12, do not write on the teacher or the other students. I had to make that a rule because I am just covered in freckles, and every one of my kids would sit next to me and start doodling on my arm and
Oh,
making a
that's so funny.
constellation. So I had to tell them, stop that. Here's a good one. Number 14, no excessive hugging as a tactic for procrastination. Do you have one of those? Oh, they just go into hug mode
Oh, I love that.
to skip work. Number 17, no sleeping in class. And the parentheses is especially the teacher. So that was written for me. Mary's sleepy a lot. We'll talk about that in a second. But then to back up those rules, you know what? I resorted to fining them 25 cents for a broken rule. I hated doing that, but once, I needed a way to just cut down on some of the nonsense. So I'll read you a few of them. This will all make you feel better. So these are, the Mr. History Lady's kids, a day in the life. So, for example, Ashley got fined for being annoying, for name calling. I got fined for being a mean mom.
Oh,
I
you
was on
find
here
yourself
too.
too.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, mom. Yeah, I got fined for a lot of unauthorized phone calls.
Now, would you find yourself or did they find you?
They find me.
Okay.
Yeah, they would point out some things. Oh, they're
Wow.
so happy to. I mean, there's so many
They're always happy
things.
to.
Yeah, but and I don't know that I ever self-fined, but anyway. Oh, some more throwing pennies, throwing scissors, throwing baby powder. So chaos. Making faces, moaning, throwing baseball cards. We had a lot of throwing in the house. Let's see. I'm trying to get to the good ones. Messing with hair. Oh, here's one. Kyle got fined for interrupting Ben-Hur. That was a historical movie. Don't mess with a historical movie. Then we got somebody being kicked in a private part. We have prompting Kyle to evil and being late for school and standing on their head and a butt massage. So,
Oh
it's
my
just a day
goodness.
in the life. They're kids and I loved them. And you know what, friends? I could go back for a day. I wouldn't a second. My kids are now, let's see if I can do this right, 34, 30. The baby's going to be 27 like tomorrow. My
Wow.
baby. So you guys, I know it's hard, especially for Mary, but enjoy them. I miss some of that nonsense. If I could go back for a day. Okay, I need to finish on my list. No crying, Mary. But yeah, make school rules, find them. Number 7, I think it's important that when you're struggling with authority, redirect them to someone who maybe has a stronger personality than you. In my case, it was their dad. He's about 6 foot tall. I'm 4'11". He's got a much deeper voice than me. So yeah, dad stepped in and I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have a mean aunt or, whoever, but get reinforcements for your weaknesses. Number 8, assign naps. And I mean that sincerely, but I feel like Mary is more often than not a napper compared to Martha. My mom's insulted if I even talk about taking a nap. She seems to think I don't know, she just looks down her nose at taking a nap. And I'm like, a nap every day girl, okay? Now it might only be 10 minutes, but I
Right.
need that recharge. And
Yes.
so when my kids and I are having a rough day and getting frazzled, I would say it's time for everyone to take a nap
Yeah.
and just rest for a minute. Maybe they're just playing quietly, but build that in. You need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional space is what it is. Number 9, have a prayer partner for the crises because you do feel a lot. So when they backtalk you or it didn't go well, have a prayer partner. I had a best friend named Wendy who literally I would meet on the corner and we would pray together. And it was like, Wendy, pray with me before I hurt someone, And last, I would just say have a game plan for meltdowns. By meltdowns, I think we all know what they are, but let's not assume we're never going to have one. You will. But there are 2 kinds of meltdowns. There's minor meltdowns. That's when the child's still vertical, but they're just frazzled. And in that case, with a minor meltdown, you model the fruits of the Spirit, which is something God's given you as a sensitive spirit. So model patience and help that child learn to problem solve frustration. But then major meltdowns, that's when they're now horizontal. Okay. They're far worse. And the major meltdown is a much more difficult situation. Hard for Mary, because Mary might be kind of a cheerleader, like, hey, get up, honey. And that child actually, the more you cheerlead, the worse it gets in a major meltdown because they're saying, no, you don't understand. It's blah, blah, blah. And it's the end of the world as they know it. But again, deal with it immediately if you need to, but not always. Because if you always deal with major meltdowns immediately, you might be getting played. Somebody might be taking advantage of your sweet spirit and your sensitive side. And so, you may need to say, honey, I see you're upset, but we have to go to X, Y, or Z. And you put their shoes on and wipe their face, but you get back to them later. And that's Christian parenting 101. When you go back later and talk about the selfishness in their heart, the little monster that wants out and how Jesus alone can take care of that selfishness and narcissism.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my tip is to have a plan for meltdowns. Think about them ahead of time.
Yes. Yep.
So anyway,
I feel like as mostly Mary, discipline is difficult for me. Um, and do you find? I mean, it just seems logical that it would be harder for a Mary than it would be for a Martha because
I think so.
we want to nurture, we want our kids to, we
Always
want them
there.
to like us, and we don't want to, though we know it's necessary. But man, it's
Mhm.
hard. It is such a hard thing. Um,
I
so
think so.
okay, do you have more tips? Because I feel like
No, that's really all I have. I
okay.
have more, but
I feel
I
like we
knew
could
we'd
keep
run out of
going.
time. Well, actually, I have just a couple other things to say about Mary and a little on Martha, and then we can
Okay, we have a few minutes,
cut
and
off and talk to these gals. Can't
yes, and just real quickly, if you guys have questions, if you could do me a favor and write, just like Victoria just did, write question at the front of your question. It makes it much easier for me
wait.
to scroll through them and see. Are you, and Linda, you can see the comments up on the side there too, right?
Sure.
So
Once
yeah,
I
if
put
you
my
write,
glasses back on.
just write the word question at the beginning. That makes it a lot easier because there's so many
Mhm.
comments coming up that are not actually questions, which I love the comments. Keep those coming too. But
Great. I love it. Well, a couple things about Mary. Like usually when I wrap this up, I just want to talk about spiritually where she's to go from here.
mhm,
For some of you, I've opened a can of worms and you're like, oh, I'm a Mary, it's Revelation. But I just want to say, Mary is good at going to the feet of Jesus. So just keep doing it. When all else fails, you know you can take what you have and lay it at the feet of Jesus. Figuratively, literally, in prayer, on your face, keep taking it to the feet of Jesus because you know from the scripture he cares. Look at how
yeah,
much he valued this woman that poured it out. And again, I don't know if she was unprepared that day. I don't know if she was a sinner or a saint and this was her dowry or if this was, such a repentant woman, maybe for some poor decisions. But we know where she was, regardless. That was at his feet. So I just kind of don't need to remind Mary, but yet I still want to say when homeschooling doesn't quite go like you think, and you've got somebody fussing at you in your life the way Martha fussed, 'cause things weren't going the way she wanted that day, just remember Jesus is there to defend you and care for you in your tender heart. I also want to say, don't not be a Mary. Now, I'm not saying don't, muster it up
right.
sometimes and do the hard things because we do need to do the hard things. My children relied on me to get it together. However,
Yeah.
God gave me a Mary heart for a reason.
Mhm.
This world needs the Mary heart, as fragile as it might be at times, but He's giving you that heart. I think for a cause, for a reason, there is a hurting world that needs it, and you're good at that. So just structure your life in ways that you're not doing Martha things. Don't put yourself under that load, but look for the Mary things. And as a closing word to my Martha friends, oh God, how I love the Marthas in my life who have held me down when I needed it, prodded me along. I do want to say, Martha, don't try to fix Mary. She's not really fixable. Not by the list that you so desperately want to give her. It's not going to help. Now, I'm not saying you don't give her a few self help books. She may need them. I have a whole library of them. It's funny, actually, they're half read self help books because that is such a Mary thing. Like if you looked at so many of the books I own, there's a bookmark somewhere in there where I trailed off, and the bookmark might be a receipt, it's a boarding pass, it might be a tissue square. Who has a bookmark when you need one, right? That's part of being a Mary.
Right.
But anyway, so yes, there are helps out there, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure that we're not supposed to be a Martha or not supposed to be a Mary, but embrace it.
Oh, I love that.
One other note, I think some of you might be worried going, now, isn't this the lady that wrote The Mystery of History? And maybe that makes you nervous. Well, let me share this insight. Hmm. Didn't God want everyone to see him and not me? I think that's all the more reason
Yeah.
he picked my Mary heart. I also think if you read my books, you'd see that my heart kind of bleeds on the pages of history. So I think God just used my Mary heart. Was it hard to write those books? Absolutely. But to him be the glory. So he found a way to use something he gave me, which is kind of inherently a weakness, but he made it a strength to feel this history. Oh, how I've cried through it and still do.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway, wanted to encourage you with that.
It's interesting to think through your personality as a Mary and having written the Mystery of History, because the way that you wrote that curriculum is it's you feel as if you are sitting and having a conversation with the author, who's you. It's very relatable. It's not so textbooky,
Yeah.
and I think typically I would imagine that most textbooks, as good as many of them are, but I would say that most textbooks, especially history and science textbooks, things like that, are written by Marthas. It's, here's point
Because they get
A,
it
B, and
done.
C, because they get it done exactly. But they list all of the things that you need to know, whereas the Mystery of History is very heartfelt and
Mhm.
it feels conversational. And so I love that
So,
about your curriculum. Um, there's a question on here, and you were talking about they were some of your tips for Marys, and you're talking about
mhm.
have an end time for your kids when they start. And I love that Victoria put this question, because I was thinking the same thing. How do you then get started on time? Because if you have an end time, if Mary's going to end at 2:00, well, Mary might end at 2, but Mary may not have started school until 1, because she's a Mary and she's not that organized. And so I know what my answer to that would be, because this is me, but I'm going to let you run with that first.
Great question. Well, I'm sure school never started earlier than 9 at our house. And I will say, getting out of bed in the morning, we would start, but it just doesn't mean it was all together. Like, I was able to leave dishes in the sink. I was able to maybe leave this askew or that askew, or maybe the beds were unmade. But, I was so committed to teaching my kids and always sensing that I needed to be on it. You know what I mean? Like, we just took school so seriously
Hmm.
that even with some things undone, I could just start. I will say
Hmm.
for my mom, that would be something she couldn't do. If
Right.
she had a stack of dishes, she'd have to do them first, because to her that was logical and in order. And sure, that's great if you had time, but I know I'm going to run out of time.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just started in the middle of chaos is my point.
Hmm.
And somewhere around 9, 10, maybe it was 11, maybe it was 1:30, but either way, I'm probably going to end at 2
Right.
because I needed to for me.
Sure.
Good
Yeah. And
question.
I would say that it depends on your family and on the ages of your kids, because
Yes.
if you have high schoolers, they're going to require several more hours a day of instruction and schooling than a second grader is going to. And so if you're a family that just can't get up and going in the morning, you're just not we are not a morning family at all. We are a very late night family, and that's because of the job my husband has always had. And that's just kind of how our family has always been. And homeschooling has allowed us to be that kind of family. But we don't start school ever before 11:00, ever. Now we're
Interesting.
definitely more of a kind of life schooling type of family, but we actually do, schoolwork. But when we have to actually sit down and do math or science or anything like that, we never start before 11. And oftentimes it's noon. And we'll get through the first subject and we're like, it's like lunchtime now. We should go eat. And so we're sometimes not finishing until 4 or 5 in the afternoon, but that's okay, because that's what works for us. And so don't feel like you need to be married to that 2:00 time
Oh,
frame.
no, that's
It's more a matter of how long is it going to take your family to do school when you get started, figure that out, and then adjust your time accordingly for that. Um,
and I
this,
certainly would have been more of an unschooler naturally and not even
mhm,
worried about the clock. But again, I was stepping it up for the personality of my children, which
right,
wanted more structure. And so, based on what they wanted, which also they wanted to be done in the afternoon, they didn't want this thing going all day long either. So, we
right.
found that balance. But
Yes, yes, absolutely. Here's a question, and this one actually is specifically for Mystery of History. She says, if we use Mystery of History, we don't need any other world history for high school, correct?
volume 4 is great for world history in high school. Volume 4, because it really ramps up. And if you think about it, they're getting the last 3 centuries, which are the most relevant to them.
Yeah,
So, in my opinion, Volume 4 is high school worthy. In fact, I hope you'll hold it for high school and let it be the one.
yeah,
That would be
yeah.
great. Little kids can tag along, but it is much more geared for the older
Hmm.
students.
Yes, yeah,
Yes, good question.
perfect. Okay, and then I lost the one. There was one for Victoria. My thing's going too fast here. Um, okay, another one about mystery history is all inclusive for high school world history. Can we just read, write, timeline, and maybe research? So in regards to using MOH. Um,
Absolutely. There's a lot of flexibility built into it because of my own personality. But look at it this way: the Mystery of History is a buffet where you can go down the buffet line and really just get the meat and the history lessons if that's all you have time for that day. But all those side dishes are there and available for those that want to feast more. They want a salad that day. They want dessert, which is additional literature. So look at it as the buffet style. And there aren't daily lesson plans because I would never come up with daily lesson plans and trap anybody in that. However, there are weekly lesson plans and
mhm.
tracks to run on, which I think is kind of enough for most people. And
Okay.
it just gives flexibility and breathability.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
By the way, I have a free gift for everybody. So just in case somebody was thinking of
Oh,
sneaking out, can I give you my
yes, of
free
course.
gift? Because I don't want them to miss that. So since we're talking about the mystery of history, and again, that's like my whole other, skill set is in that I have a free workshop titled When Bible History and World History Meet Face to Face. It's free to your attendees. It's normally $3.99 on my website. But if you go to themysteryofhistory.com and search for that workshop, When Bible History and World History Meet Face to Face, which is just a beautiful interlocking of, again, Bible and secular history as, one, which is
Yeah.
how it should be. So there's a coupon code to get it free. And
Okay.
here it is
Okay.
to support you, Yvette. So the coupon code is, let me just look, make sure, Schoolhouse Rocked. Because
Schoolhouse rocked.
we want
Okay.
to remember to pray for you.
Aw,
We hope this has been beneficial this whole week, for you guys. We're thinking a lot about you. So
thank
Schoolhouse
you.
Rocked, all lowercase, no spaces. Put
Okay.
that on my website. You'll get a free workshop, and maybe it'll inspire you if you haven't seen my work before. Again, it's pulling together Bible
Yeah.
and world history, and it's really quite fascinating. Most of
I
us didn't grow
love
up
that.
with it that way, if at
Yeah.
all.
I love that. I love that. Maybe if Garrett is listening in, maybe he can put the link to that when Bible history and world history meet face to face, and
Meet
then
face to
Schoolhouse
face.
rocked. And make sure
Yeah.
you do ROCKED
Yes.
at the end of
Yes.
that. So thank you for that. That's awesome,
Sure.
Linda.
People can also follow me on Facebook. You can subscribe to my website if you're on there, and I give out monthly newsletters and blogs and stuff like that.
Love
So,
it. And your website is themysteryofhistory.com.
themysteryofhistory.com. Don't leave out the. Yeah,
The yeah, the
themysteryofhistory.com.
mysteryofhistory.com.
Yeah. But
Um,
I'm still happy to talk more
yeah,
Mary and Martha. I just wanted to sneak that in there. I know
thank you.
people are
Thank you. Thank you. We do
anxious.
have, there's a couple more questions here. Let's see. This
Okay.
one says, what about tips? This is a good one. And you kind of touched on this, but I want to ask the question again. What about tips for a Martha mom with Mary
Mm.
kids? From your
Oh,
history, what can we do better for our Marys?
I love that question. It already shows you're not as much a Martha as you think. You're
Yeah.
thinking about your Marys, and I would say be patient. Think about my poor mother. My mother, for so many years, really worried herself about me because it was hard for me to appear to have it together. It's a free spirit. It's an artsy side. There's just stuff going on in here. I did make good grades, but it was hard for me to follow through on a lot. And my room was a mess and as a high schooler and stuff, but listen, she loved me, she worried for me, and then she watched me grow, and really the Lord got a hold of me. I got saved at age 17, and so what happened is the Lord gave me a set of values when I came to know him that changed my perspective, changed my priorities. I'm sure, that just led me down a path of wanting to please him. And I'm the girl that wanted to please him and be at his feet because I feel like up until I was 17, I had done so much wrong. I had made a lot of mistakes. I lived for me and it showed. I was that high school girl. And, if you had looked at me, you would have known I wasn't probably a church girl. So I'd say just be patient with your Marys, recognize their free spirit, and don't date their lesson plans. Maybe give them a week to run on. And also, when you're cleaning house, maybe you give your Marthas a to do list, but give your Mary one thing to do at a time, whisper it in her ear or his ear, and then reward them with a lot of praise once they've done it because that child doesn't do the list well.
Mhm.
I despise boxes and I even despise sometimes putting things on paper because I feel like paper cannot begin to contain what sometimes this heart feels. It
Mhm.
falls short, and it's true of a list. If you saw my to-do list now, can I show for fun? You know what I
Sure.
live by? This is so embarrassing. For one, I live by a lot of Post-its. You see that real pretty desk behind me? Don't be deceived. In front of me, what y'all can't see is a whole bunch. I've got a Kleenex box, a glass, messed up. Anyway, You wouldn't even believe the things that are on this side that y'all can't see. It's kind of messy right now. But all back to Post-its. I just live by Post-its, and I live by a spiral notebook that just
Love
sits
it.
by my desk. And the reason I go for a spiral notebook is because I won't lose it.
Right.
Um, it stays in a spiral form because if it's on a piece of paper that might travel, otherwise it's going to be the bottom of somewhere. So anyway,
Yeah,
spiral notebook, Post-its.
I
That's
love
how I
it.
live life, and a calendar. But that's it. We stop there.
I
You know.
also have a spiral notebook, and it's pretty because I want pretty. So we were
Yeah.
talking about that because we're Marys and I want pretty things. And Garrett always tells me that I should have other ways to organize myself. And I'm like, but that doesn't work for me. I want my
Pretty
spiral
spiral
notebook.
does just fine. This would be pretty, but I'm using up my daughter's last
Oh.
spiral that she left at home. So, I want to save the planet too. So I'm using up
Uh,
old spiral notebooks.
let's answer. I think we can get to one more.
Okay.
This one says, how do you not feel at war with your children all the time about school and chores?
Mm,
That's
Great
tough sometimes.
question.
That's a good question.
I will say I certainly confessed my weaknesses to my children often. I mean, we went over this a lot. They knew my Mary side. They knew I didn't always have it together. And sometimes I just had to apologize that I fell asleep almost every other day in algebra, or whatever it was, or that those lesson plans weren't made and we didn't, there was this time I didn't have it together. But you know what? Think of the things that I did give my children, and they knew they were loved because I was the mama that curled up with them at night on the top bunk to talk about puberty again, and that they're going to make it through. And I am the mom that read out loud, and I am the mom that prayed with them. And, there's just so many things I certainly did to invest that there was no doubt I loved them. Didn't always have it together, but that was okay. Love kind of conquers all. This will be real silly, but we have a family theme song. My husband's put together a lot of collective videos of like old home movies and stuff, and our family theme song turned out to be Love Shack. It's just a silly song.
B-52's Love Shack.
B-52's
I
Love
love
Shack.
it.
That's like the Hobar's theme song because at the end of the day, we certainly loved each other. Didn't always get along. I had a cat, a monkey, and a golden retriever in personality, and the cat and the monkey fought all the time. So I was separating them a lot, but there was love. So Mary's good at that and covers a multitude of sins.
Yeah, love it. And the cat and the monkey get along now that they're adults.
Sure they do.
So, wow. Thank you, Linda. You are a blessing. I've loved going through this. And I know this is such a fun little quiz. So hopefully those who got to take part in this, you'll really be able to walk away with some encouragement, just knowing that God made you exactly the way that you are. He made your kids exactly the way that they are. And he's made us all this way for a purpose. And so it's so good to know and to understand really how he made us so that we can better serve his kingdom. So thank you guys so much for.
And
Oh,
I
yes,
wanted to always start a Facebook group for Mary's called For Mary's Only, but who would host it? And we spend too much time on it, so I don't know that we're ever going to get this off the ground.
Oh my goodness. Well, do you know how many people named Mary would just join it because they would think it was a group just for them?
Yeah. So anyway, if we see in the comments somebody wants to start, I might participate.
If a Martha wants to start a For Mary's Only group, maybe that's how it needs to go down. But yes, thank you so much, Linda. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to spend with us and to help us just better understand.
Thank you for having me. I hope these weaknesses will encourage someone out there. Y'all are in my prayers.
I'm sure it will. So thank you guys. And thank you for joining us again today, you guys. We have another amazing session coming up. We have two actually today, but our next one is with Todd Wilson, and he's going to be talking about lies that homeschoolers believe. So you are not going to want to miss that. He is a homeschool dad who is just full of wisdom and wit. He's funny, and you're really going to enjoy that one. He's going to bring some great encouragement to you as well. And then following that, we've got another discussion panel at the end of this day that you are going to be so encouraged by. So make sure you join us for the next few hours because we're still going strong. And we'll be back in a few minutes. Don't forget that there are contests still going on. So make sure that you look on the Facebook page or on the website and enter the contest. You guys, there are a ton of great things to give away. We have been so just blessed by the generosity of many of our speakers and just our sponsors, those who have rallied around us to get this event done this week. It's been exciting, and the swag bag too. So there's so many fun things that you guys get to enjoy with this. And please keep telling your friends. People are still signing up like crazy. It's so fun. And anything that they've missed already, they can come back and watch again after the fact. So have a fantastic rest of your afternoon, Linda. Thank you for your time. And we'll see you guys back here in about 15 minutes. Bye.